All right. Good evening, everyone. Shubranil. I hope I'm audible. आवाज आ रही है? Am I audible, Shubranil? Good evening. Right. Now we're talking about the early Vedic age. कई चीज़ें हम डिस्कस कर चुके थे. For example, their origin, the debate, the surrounding it. We had talked about the geographical expansion of the Aryans. We're talking about the features of life during the early Vedic age. क्या क्या देख लिया था हमने? Their economic life we had covered, their political life ये हो गया था, their social life we had covered. बचा क्या था? The religious life of the early Aryans. Now, the religion of the early Aryans was characterized by a combination of nature worship and yagyas, right? So, nature worship, why do you think they were doing nature worship? What was the mainstay of the economy? Pastoralism, and they were dependent upon the forces of nature for survival, right? They deified various natural phenomena such as the wind, such as the sun, such as the rains, etc. They gave them godly forms and attributed different gods for controlling them. For example, Indra controlled the rain and thunder. The sun was controlled by Surya, and fire was controlled by Agni, water was controlled by Varun, right? These kinds of things took place. Apart from this, yagyas also formed an important aspect of their belief system. What were these? Sacrifices. And sacrifices agar ho rahe hain, so that means that transactional relationship between man and God is existing. Man is worshipping God because he expects certain things in return. Therefore, nature of the religion कैसा होगा? Materialistic or spiritual? Largely materialistic होगा, right? Rigved talks about a single god, or are there several gods and goddesses? Several gods and goddesses, as many as 33 different gods and goddesses. As such, the early Vedic religion was polytheistic in nature. The Aryans believed in a combination of gods and goddesses. But at the same time, we also see a transition towards monotheism, right? Among the Vedic Aryans, Cathenotheism was another major. We're talking that polytheism was the main characteristic, but there was a transition towards monotheism as well. एक feature हमको देखने के लिए मिलता है Cathenotheism का. That means while the people continued to believe in different gods and goddesses, they considered one god to be their supreme deity, and this formed the root of monotheism as well. In one place, for example, the Rig Veda asks, is Agni one in many or many of one? For example, is Agni one of many gods, or is he simply a representation of one of the multiple representations of the same god, right? So the Rig Veda is also introspective regarding the nature of God, the nature of reality. And while the religion itself was materialistic, the budding signs of high philosophy were also starting to become visible. The signs of spiritualism or philosophy had also started showing their roots or showing their buds. Okay? Did the Aryans worship idols? No. Idol worship did not exist. Was religion a private affair or a public affair? Largely a private affair. Most of the sacrifices were performed inside the house by the ordinary householder. ठीक है? Did it have a strong element of ritualism and priestly domination? No. Ritualism and priestly domination did not exist. While rituals were performed, they were quite simple and inexpensive and could be performed without the involvement of priests. There were several different categories of priests, but their involvement in the regulation of the religious and social lives of the people was quite limited in nature. Okay? Were there a large degree of religious disabilities? On the people? Were different sections of people prohibited from performing religious rituals? No, ऐसा कोई restriction नहीं लगता था. Everybody was allowed to practice religion without any restrictions. Once again, the elements of that same tribal egalitarianism which were visible in the society and the economy and polity of the early Vedic age, they are also going to be visible in the religion of the early Vedic. Clear है? लिख लीजिए इसको जल्दी से. Give the heading. Religious life. Religious life. देखो. Naturalism. Naturalism. Within brackets you can write nature worship. Was an important aspect of early Vedic religion. Can you please repeat after polytheistic log out हो गया था automatic अचानक. So we were saying that different gods and goddesses का mention हमको ऋग्वेद से मिल जाता है. This indicates that the religion was polytheistic in nature. People believed in multiple gods and goddesses, but at the same time we find a prominent shift towards monotheism. So while the base of the religion was polytheistic, the element of monotheism was starting to become visible. In transition phase में हमको क्या दिखता है? The emergence of cathenotheism. Cathenotheism or henotheism is a practice of believing in multiple gods and goddesses, but considering one of those gods or goddesses to be supreme, right? And ये trend हमको देखने के लिए मिलता है. For example, in the Rigved, there are multiple hymns dedicated to different gods and goddesses, and at the time a particular ritual was being performed or a particular hymn was being chanted, so different gods and goddesses were being invoked. When those gods were invoked, while people did not stop believing in other gods and goddesses, those gods were considered to be the supreme ones. Okay? And then finally, the Rigved also starts to question the nature of God himself. Right? That are there multiple gods, or are the different gods actually representations of the same supreme God? Right? Is he responsible simply for regulating the natural phenomena, or is he actually the creator and sustainer of life? इस तरह के आइडियाज भी अब इमर्ज होने शुरू. Right? There was a gradual shift from polytheism towards monotheism. Clear है? Alright. हाँ, क्या देखा था अभी हमने? हाँ, naturalism or nature worship was an important aspect of early Vedic religion due to the following factors. Due to the following factors. 1, 2, 3, 4 करके लिख सकते हो. Number 1, the survival of the early Aryans depended upon nature. Depended upon nature. Number 2, they did not have scientific explanations. They did not have scientific explanations for the different natural phenomena. And perceived them to be controlled by some supernatural forces. ठीक है. Number 3, therefore the deification of nature was a natural outcome. Stop. Next main point. Polytheism was another important characteristic. As the Rigved mentions 33 different gods and goddesses. Such as 33 different gods and goddesses. Such as Indra, Agni, Varun, Vayu, Vishnu, Om, Pusa, Aditi, etc. ठीक है. नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट लिखो और नेक्स्ट सब पॉइंट लिखो. However, the practice of cathenotheism is believed to have been is believed to have been a part of the polytheistic belief system. The polytheistic belief system. Stop. While people continued to believe in multiple gods, comma, one out of them, one out of them was considered supreme, was considered supreme on specific occasions, on specific occasions. ठीक है, next up point. Signs that the early Aryans had started experimenting. Signs that the early Aryans, signs, S-I-G-N-S, signs that the early Aryans had started experimenting with monotheism, are also present in the Rig Veda. Are also present in the Rig Veda. Example. It asks whether Agni is many of one, or one of many, Full stop. That is, do different gods exist, or are they simply different manifestations of the same supreme deity? ठीक है, ये हो गया पॉलीथियज्म टू मोनोथियज्म का जर्नी. नेक्स्ट गिव दी नेक्स्ट पॉइंट लिखो. द अर्ली वैदिक रिलीजन, हाँ, नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट. द अर्ली वैदिक रिलीजन was materialistic in nature. The point. People worshipped for the fulfillment of desires, and sought to appease the gods, through yagyas and mantras. ठीक है, mantras are hymns and yagyas are sacrifices. Next up point. Therefore, the relationship between man and God was transactional in nature. The relationship between man and God was transactional in nature. Full stop. According to the Rig Veda, most Aryans worshipped for, इन दो चीजों के लिए वर्शिप करते थे, प्रजा एंड पशु. वर्शिप फॉर प्रजा. प्रजा का मतलब sons, right? Male child. And pashu means cattle. Male children and wealth के लिए वर्शिप करते. ठीक है. नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट लिखो. It appears that religion was a private matter for the early Aryans. Stop. A point. Most Vedic sacrifices were performed within the house by ordinary householders. Stop. Next point. There is no mention of any elaborate public sacrifice such as Ashwamedh, Rajsuya, or Vajpaya sacrifice. Rajsuya and वाजपेयी सैक्रिफाइस. ये सब कब इमर्ज होगा? लेटर वैदिक एज में. ठीक है. अर्ली वैदिक एज में नहीं होते थे. राइट. Since most of the sacrifices were performed by the individual householder within their houses, the religion appears to be a private affair rather than a public affair. Next main point. Further, the religious practice was free of rigid ritualism and priestly domination. Full stop. The point. While several classes of priests existed, the primary role was performed by the householder, Kulpati. Okay? Primary role was performed by the householder. Full stop. A point. Next a point. Further, the sacrifices were simple and inexpensive. inexpensive. With no clear guidelines, or correct procedure or pronunciation or pronunciation. ठीक है? So householder used to recite all the mantras also, and he used to do the actual sacrifice also without any thought to the correct procedure or the correct pronunciation of the mantras, right? ये सब कब होने लगेगा? During the later Vedic age, and as a result priestly domination is going to increase. ये correct procedure और pronunciation का ज्ञान किसके पास होगा? Ordinary people या experts के पास? Experts के पास, and the experts were the priests. Next point लिखो. There were no religious disabilities. There were no religious disabilities, and all Aryans were allowed to perform sacrifices without discrimination. Without discrimination. Okay? That means people belonging to all varnas were allowed to participate and even lead the sacrifices. ऐसा नहीं है कि केवल ब्राह्मण priest ही उसको perform करवाएगा या फिर officiate करेगा उसके ऊपर. Even if a Shudra wants to conduct a sacrifice, he can do it inside his own household without any priestly intervention or priestly participation. The kind of religious access that men and women had, that was a little bit. Who is always going to be in the leadership role? Men. While women are always going to be in the secondary roles. Meaning, while certain sacrifices could be performed without the participation of women, there were no sacrifices which could be performed by the without the participation of men. Write down. While women, subpoint, while women participated in sacrifices, comma, their role was secondary. Full stop. Women alone could not perform sacrifices. And always participated in the capacity of wives or daughters. ठीक है? Next लिखो. The important gods include Indra, god of rain, thunder and war. Agni, he was the fire god. He was also considered to be the god of sacrifices, yagyas. He was also considered to be the god of all priests. And he was also considered to be the messenger between men and gods. Varun, he was the god of water as well as the god of something known as Rit. क्या है ये? This is the cosmic order upon which the entire universe functions. Right? तो एक कॉस्मिक बैलेंस होता है यूनिवर्स, उस बैलेंस को रेगुलेट करने वाले गॉड कौन थे? वरुण. अपार्ट फ्रॉम दिस, these were the three most important ones. Apart from this, there were some relatively lesser important gods, such as Vishnu. He was god of the sun god. ठीक है, अर्ली वैदिक पीरियड में सन गॉड थे विष्णु. He was not the sustainer of the universe as it was during the later Vedic period. Then Om, he was the god of drink, a magical drink, right? Then we have let's say Yam, he was the god of death. Then we have Prithvi, he was the goddess of earth. Then we have Pusa, the goddess of the dawn. Then we have Aditi, he was the mother of all gods. Right? Most important gods कौन से हैं? Indra, Agni and Varun. Now, it is also possible to categorize the different gods and goddesses on the basis of cosmology, function, and gender. Right? On the basis of cosmology, three different types of gods. Earthly gods, atmospheric gods, and ethereal gods. Earthly gods who regulate natural phenomena on the earth, such as Prithvi, Varun, etc. Right? Agni. Atmospheric god who regulate atmospheric phenomena, such as Indra or Vayu or see Vishnu, who is the sun god. Ethereal gods ये उन चीजों को रेगुलेट करते हैं जो आंखों से दिखता नहीं है. फॉर एग्जाम्पल वरुण, who is the regulator of Rith or the cosmic order upon which the entire universe functions. ठीक है. Then on the basis of function, कैसे सिंगल फंक्शन वाले गॉड्स, राइट. सुब्रानिल अभी भी हो रहा है क्या इशू? Is it any better now? Huh? Better. ठीक है. ऑलराइट. हाँ, तो सिंगल फंक्शन वाले गॉड्स किस तरह के गॉड्स हो गए? वायु, विष्णु, अदिति, etc. Soma, etc. Those who are responsible for regulating one aspect of nature. And multiple function वाले gods कई सारी चीजों को रेगुलेट कर रहे हैं. फॉर एग्जाम्पल इंद्रा इज द गॉड ऑफ थंडर, रेनफॉल एज वेल एज वॉर. अग्नि is the god of fire also, the god of priest also, the god of sacrifice also, and the messenger between different gods and goddesses, between different gods and men, etc. ठीक है. And on the basis of gender क्या देखने के लिए मिलता है हमको? हाउ मेनी जेंडर्स? 2 genders, male gods and female gods, right? No third gender, so no hermaphroditic gods are seen over here. वो कब इमर्ज होना शुरू होंगे? फ्रॉम द गुप्ता पीरियड ऑनवर्ड्स, राइट. तो जब पुरानिक लिटरेचर इमर्ज होना शुरू होगा, इतिहास लिटरेचर, पुरानिक लिटरेचर, फ्रॉम दैट पीरियड ऑन, आइडियाज सच एज शिखंडी और अर्धनारीश्वर एटसेट्रा वो उस समय इमर्ज. नाउ व्हाट वाज द लेवल ऑफ philosophical development in early Vedic religion? Relatively low था या extremely high था? Relatively low था. The religion was primarily materialistic in nature. However, early Aryans had definitely started to experiment with philosophical thoughts, right? For example, the 10th mandala of the Rig Veda consists of a famous hymn known as the Purush Sukta, the Purush Sukta hymn, right? What does it describe? It describes a heavenly sacrifice performed by Prajapati or Brahma on himself. He sacrificed himself, and from different parts of his body emerged the different components of the universe as well as human beings. From his mouth, for example, emerged the Brahmins, from his arms the Kshatriyas, from his thighs and the stomach the Vaishyas, and from the feet the Shudras. तो पुरुष सूक्त में इसके बारे में बात करी जा रही है, अबाउट द आइडिया ऑफ creation. So a creation myth is being woven, right? And पहले creation होगा, फिर ideas of sustenance and destruction, they are also going to emerge. शुरुआत कब होती है? During the early Vedic age. It is going to reach its conclusion during the later Vedic. High philosophy later Vedic age में emerge होगा with the Upanishads. So write down. While the level of philosophical development was relatively low, since religion was materialistic in nature, and concepts such as since religion was materialistic in nature and concepts such as dharma, karma, moksha, etc. were absent. ठीक है? Were absent. So while the level of philosophical development was low because of these things, comma, आगे लिखो were absent के बाद comma, some flights of philosophy were visible. Flights of philosophy, उड़ान, flights of philosophy were visible. Example, the Purush Sukta hymn in the 10th mandala describes the Purush-made sacrifice. In which Prajapati that is the primordial man sacrificed himself and divided his body from which the different components of the universe emerged. Full stop. This was the earliest creation myth. Of the Aryans. Now this also reinforces the idea that monotheism की तरफ वो बढ़ रहे थे. Why? Because कोई external agent create नहीं कर रहा है universe को. In fact, the universe is being self-created by the primordial man or the supreme God. Write down the point. Further, this philosophy hints at the emergence of monotheism since it presents Prajapati presents Prajapati as the universe itself or the ultimate reality or the ultimate reality. ठीक है, ये हो गया जो अर्ली वैदिक रिलीजन है. ऑल द डिफरेंट एस्पेक्ट्स ऑफ अर्ली वैदिक लाइफ वी हैव covered, their society, polity, economy and religion. Now we need to do the same for the later Vedic age. (1000 to 600 BC). Question I had: does the Venus and history made their narratives through their personification of gods? Question is not very clear, but हाँ, इसमें some thoughts I'd like to express that यहाँ पे जो आइडिया है ना विनर्स ऑफ हिस्ट्री और लूजर्स ऑफ हिस्ट्री, दिस in the context of the Aryans is not very applicable. Why? Because ये जो context है winners of history वाला, that is a result of the early interpretation of early Aryan history or early Vedic history. That Aryan culture was the result of their victory over the Harappan civilization. Right? So they destroyed the old Harappan religion and imposed their new Vedic religion upon them. This we have already disproven. तो आर्यन इन्वेजन थ्योरी को हम डिस्प्रूव कर चुके हैं. Now what we can say is that the evolution of the Aryan religion was the result of a long process of constant philosophical and religious evolution which had taken place over time. And इसमें क्या चीजें रोल प्ले करेंगे? The changing ecology as the Aryans migrated from place to place, the changing nature of their economy, the changing nature of their political system, the changing nature of their society, as well as the new groups they came into contact with. Some ideas they would take from those groups, some ideas they would give to those groups. एक organic process. ठीक है? If Kaurava had won Mahabharata, are we going to preach Shakuni instead of Krishna? See, ये first of all, none of these works that we are talking about, these are works of pure history. तो यहाँ पे winners in history नहीं है, winners in mythology आप बोल सकते, right? And when it comes to mythology, yes, we can say that a certain link exists between the political outfit associated with a particular mythology or belief system and others. तो दोनों के बीच में conflict होता है, but that is not the main basis for political, right? And very rarely are we going to find कि लड़ाई किन्हीं दोनों लोगों में भी के बीच में हो रही है only on the basis of religion. And as political establishment comes to power, it normalizes or it makes the political ideology of which the religious ideology is a part the new normal. तो पूरा का पूरा सिस्टम रिप्लेस किया जाता है, उसमें कुछ एलिमेंट्स ऑफ चेंज भी होंगे, कुछ एलिमेंट्स ऑफ कॉन्टिन्यूटी भी देखेंगे, राइट? बट ये जो डिस्कशन है ना, ये थोड़ा फिलोसॉफिकल हो जाएगा कि इफ कौरवाज हैड वन आर वी गोइंग टू प्रीच शकुनी इंस्टेड ऑफ कृष्णा. ऐसा नहीं है. कृष्णा रिप्रेजेंट्स अ पर्टिकुलर सेट ऑफ आइडियाज, शकुनी रिप्रेजेंट्स अ पर्टिकुलर सेट ऑफ आइडियाज. किसी भी रिलीजन में द बेसिक मैसेज इज गोइंग टू बी दी सेम. हो सकता है नाम चेंज हो जाए, बट व्हाट दोज नेम्स रिप्रेजेंट दे आर गोइंग टू रिमेन दी सेम. इट इज ऑलवेज गोइंग टू बी अ कॉन्फ्लिक्ट बिटवीन गुड एंड ईविल. वो गुड और ईविल के डेफिनेशंस भी चेंज हो सकते हैं विद टाइम. क्लियर है? राइट. तो लेटर वैदिक एज एक एक करके कई सारी चीजें हमको डिस्कस करनी है. फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, देयर geographical footprint. What do we find? Eastward migration. कहां से कहां? फ्रॉम द रीजन ऑफ फिफ्थ सिंधवा टुवर्ड्स द मिडिल गैंजेटिक वैली. ठीक है. डू वी गेट एनी एविडेंस फॉर दिस? Yes, both archaeological as well as literary evidence. लिखो geographical footprint or geographical expansion. Write down. During the later Vedic age, Aryans began migrating towards the east. Aryans began migrating towards the east via the foothills of the Himalayas. Via the foothills of the Himalayas. Stop. A large number of PGW sites with iron have been found in the foothills. Such as Ahichhatra and Shravasti. Ahichhatra कहाँ पे? प्रेजेंट डे बरेली. नॉर्थ वेस्टर्न यूपी. श्रावस्ती कहाँ पर? प्रेजेंट डे नॉर्थ ईस्टर्न यूपी. ठीक है. नेक्स्ट पॉइंट लिखो. अकॉर्डिंग टू दी तैत्रेय ब्राह्मणा. According to the Taittiriya Brahmana, the land between the Ganga and Yamuna was the Madhya Desh. Madhya Desh क्या था according to the Taittiriya Brahmana? It was the upper Ganga valley. Or the western Ganga Yamuna Doab. Next point. The Shatpat Brahmana gives details about the establishment of the Videha state. By Prince Videha Madhava on the banks of the river Sadanira, present day Gandak. ठीक है. कहां तक पहुंच गए थे? अब बिहार तक. What does it inform us? Videha Madhava moved towards the east along with his followers with the help of Agni and Ayas. Agni is fire and Ayas is iron. So these were probably used for clearing the forests. Write down. It also informs us. It also informs us that Agni and Ayas were used by Videha Madhava to clear the forest. Fire and Ayas, iron, were used by Videha Madhava to clear the forests. Further, next, the Atharva Veda mentions the states of Magad and Anga. मगध कहां पर? सेंट्रल बिहार. एंड अंगा कहां पर? ईस्टर्न बिहार. वेस्ट बंगाल से सटा हुआ रीजन है. But doesn't provide much detail. Write down. But doesn't provide much detail. क्या मतलब हुआ? Were they the core zones of the Aryans or were they the peripheral zones, frontier zones? Frontier zones, indicating that these were frontier zones. These were frontier zones for the Aryans. That these were frontier zones for the Aryans. Next लिखो. The Aitreya Brahmana also mentions the two oceans along with the Narmada and the Vindhyas. Narmada and the Vindhyas. What does this indicate? That they had probably explored the whole of the North Indian subcontinent but lived primarily in the mid Ganga valley. This indicates subpoint लिख सकते हो, this indicates that they had explored the whole of North India, but lived primarily in the mid Ganga valley. The mid Ganga valley. ठीक है. तो पहले क्या देखने के लिए मिला था? मेन रीजन ऑफ कॉन्सेंट्रेशन वाज दिस रीजन, राइट? क्या बोलते थे इसको? दी सप्त सिंधवा और दी आर्यवर्त, ठीक है? Then we find that there was gradual eastward migration of the Aryans from the Aryavarta region towards the mid Ganga valley, ठीक है? फैक्ट ये जो रीजन है, दिस came to be known as, that region came to be known as the Madhya Desh and also Brahmavarta. Then the peripheral zones of the early Aryans consisted of this region, that is northern and central Bihar, and the rest of the lower Ganga valley. They had explored these regions but were not probably settled in them. In fact, by this point of time, they had explored the whole of North India, including the Vindhyas and the Narmada river. So they knew about all these regions but were not actively inhabiting them. The main concentration was in Brahmavarta or the mid Ganga valley. Also known as Madhya Desh. ठीक है, ये हो गया the eastward expansion of the Aryans. Next we need to talk about the economic structure during the later Vedic age, right? Early Vedic age में what was the chief economic activity? Pastoralism. Now that is going to be replaced by agriculture. Why? As they migrated towards the east, they came into more fertile regions, so soil fertility was much greater. Secondly, this entire region, the Terai region, was drained by several rivers and streams. यहाँ पे open grasslands कम मिलेंगे. You will get alluvial fertile plains जहाँ पे ordinarily forests होंगे, but if you clear them, you will have expanses of open farmland, right? So that was also a factor. Further, by this point of time, iron technology had been developed. Therefore, iron could be used to clear forests along with fire. And further, iron also aided the farming process. It made the sowing process much more effective, much more efficient, because it would allow for the deep plowing of the soil. Then हार्वेस्टिंग में काफ़ी मदद मिलेगी इसकी वजह से. फर्दर towards the east, wet paddy transplantation was possible. So as a result, agriculture का importance अब बढ़ता जाएगा. Was one major change that took place. With the rising importance of agriculture, Is the same classless society of the early Vedic age going to remain visible? No. So, class distinctions are going to start appearing with the consolidation of the concept of private property and the unequal distribution of wealth. ठीक है, ये चेंज होने वाला है. हाँ, एग्रीकल्चर पे वापस जाते हैं. अर्लियर व्हाट वाज द ओनली नेम फॉर क्रॉप्स? यवा. नाउ different varieties of crops are going to be mentioned, such as yava, which is going to continue meaning both barley as well as wheat. But apart from that, a specific term for wheat, Godhuma and Prihi, or rice. Non-food crops are also going to be cultivated or not? Yes, such as cotton and sugar cane, they are going to be cultivated. Because of the technological and climatic changes, would the Aryans attain the stage of agricultural surplus? Yes. As surplus is achieved, what is going to happen? Secondary economic activities are going to become more and more important. The economy is going to become more and more diversified, right? Craft proliferation is going to take place. Craft specialization is also going to take place. The volume of trade between different centers is going to start increasing. The distances over which trade occurs, that is also going to start increasing. With the passage of time, the volume of trade is also going to increase. And इसका result क्या होगा? The emergence of new settlements. क्या feature होंगे इन settlements के? Will they be rural or urban? Urban. Urbanization के early beginnings, shoots of urbanization are going to become visible towards the end of the later Vedic age. You are going to start finding new words in the later Vedic texts, such as pur or nagar, etc. Right? So they usually refer to towns or urban settlement. Okay? So ये changes होंगे. Now, what would be the basis of trade? Would trade continue to be conducted on the basis of the barter system, or would coins be introduced for the first time? Coins का introduction second urbanization जब full swing में होगा तब होगा, when a critical threshold has been crossed. That is going to take place during the महाजनपद period, that is the post Vedic age. अभी क्या है, उसके उस स्टेज के जस्ट पहले वाला स्टेज, राइट? So while monetization was absent, इसकी हमें अर्ली ग्लिम्सेस जरूर दिख जाते हैं. कैसे? Later Vedic texts refer to commodities such as nishkas, atmanas, etc. क्या थे ये? These were the terms used for ornaments, usually made of precious metals such as gold. what could they have been used for? As mediums of exchange also. ठीक है, तो इसके अर्ली ग्लिम्सेस हमको मिल जाते हैं मेटालिक करेंसी के, लेकिन मेटालिक करेंसी इन इट्स फुल फॉर्म वी डोंट गेट टू सी. ठीक है, in other words we can say that the later Vedic age was the age of transition between pastoralism to urbanization. तो जो जैसे न्यूलिथिक और मच्योर हड़प्पन पीरियड में प्री सॉरी अर्ली हड़प्पन कल्चर था ना, वैसे ही between the early Vedic pastoralist and the second urbanization, Mahajanpad period, second urbanization, this phase, later Vedic phase, was the pre-urban phase. ठीक है, write down economic structure. देखो, agriculture emerged as the backbone of the economy due to ABCA, the availability of more fertile land, in the Ganga Valley. B, exchange of agricultural know-how or agricultural knowledge. With whom? With the Chalcolithic natives. Right? As they migrated towards the east, they came into contact with uncontacted communities of Chalcolithic people who had been living in the Ganga Valley for a long period of time and had therefore a more advanced sense of agriculture. Aryans came into contact with them, adopted the same agricultural practices. And C likho, the beginning of the use of iron. Full stop. Next main point likho. The later Aryans were aware of the techniques of tilling the soil, crop rotation, and flood and canal irrigation. Full stop. They cultivated Yava, then brackets you can write wheat/barley, Godhuma, then brackets wheat, and Vrihi, then brackets rice. Godhuma, wheat, and Vrihi, rice. Further write down non-food crops. हाँ, सब पॉइंट लिख सकते हो. Non-food crops such as cotton and sugarcane were also cultivated. Next main point. With the transformation of the economy towards settled agriculture, towards settled agriculture, comma, secondary economic activities began growing. Full stop. Point. Craft proliferation. That means the variety of crafts. Craft proliferation, comma. Craft specialization. मतलब the involvement of different groups of people in distinct production activities and also the regional specialization of different crafts. So हर craft के लिए अलग अलग regional centers emerge होने लगे. ऐसा नहीं है कि सब जगह पे कॉटन टेक्सटाइल का वीविंग होगा या सिल्क का वीविंग होगा या फिर ज्वेलरी का इंडस्ट्री फ्लरिश करेगा. अलग अलग क्लस्टर्स में हो. ठीक है. तो क्या लिखा है अभी आपने? क्राफ्ट प्रोलिफरेशन, क्राफ्ट स्पेशलाइजेशन and the growth of regional trade on a regular basis. What is the whole sentence? With the transformation of the economy from pastoralism towards settled agriculture, craft specialization, craft proliferation, and the growth of regional trade on a regular basis had started. Stop. Next point. However, the level of agricultural surplus and the importance of secondary economic activities increased gradually throughout the later Vedic age. ठीक है. अब पॉइंट लिखो. Therefore, the later Vedic age represents the penultimate stage before full-fledged urbanization. ठीक है. Before full-fledged urbanization. Characteristics of urbanization during the second urbanization are going to be almost the same as characteristics during the first urbanization. That means large cities, extensive internal trade, which would be followed by extensive external trade also. Then we are going to have the widespread use of script, cultural unification after a particular period of time, और साथ में क्या देखने के लिए मिलेगा? हाँ, ideological unification as well. So these things are going to emerge, but after the end of the later Vedic age. ये कौन सा स्टेज है? उस स्टेज के जस्ट पहले वाला स्टेज. That means those features, although they are not clearly visible, उनके glimpses देखने अब शुरू हो गए हैं. Next main point लिखो. However, the early glimpses of urbanization started becoming visible towards the end of the later Vedic age itself. अब पॉइंट लिखो. Towns and proto-cities began emerging, which were described with the suffixes. इस तरह का सफिक्स लगाया जाएगा उनके नाम के आगे, पुर और नगर, with the suffixes of pur or nagar. Next point. While metallic currency was not introduced, later Vedic literature mentions terms such as निष्का और सतमना to denote gold and silver ornaments, to denote gold and silver ornaments that may have been used to facilitate exchange. ठीक है? Clear? Next main point. Therefore, the later Vedic age represents an age of transformation, between the pastoralist early Vedic age and the urbanized Mahajanpad age. Okay? ठीक है. राइट. तो ये हो गया हमारा इकोनॉमिक लाइफ ऑफ द लेटर वैदिक एज. नेक्स्ट क्या डिस्कस करना है हमको? द पॉलिटिकल स्ट्रक्चर of the later Vedic age. What kind of changes are going to be induced as a result of the beginning of agriculture and it becoming the mainstay of the economy? Yes. So earlier states कैसे होते थे? Non-territorial tribal states. Now territorial states are going to emerge. Why? Because the importance of land as an economic resource is increasing, and in order to increase their tax base, different rulers are going to try and bring as much land under their control as possible. ठीक है? Further, पहले के जो डेमोक्रेटिक एलिमेंट्स होते थे, आर दे गोइंग टू रिमेन इन प्लेस? दे आर गोइंग टू बिकम ऑब्सोलीट. दे आर गोइंग टू बी रिप्लेस्ड बाय एब्सोल्यूट एंड हेरिडिटरी monarchies. Why? because as agriculture and agricultural surplus is generated, what is going to emerge? Regular taxation in the form of land revenue. This land revenue is going to allow the kings to do what? Maintain an army as well as a large bureaucracy through which they could transmit their control through all the levels of power. आर्मी और ब्यूरोक्रेसी अब बड़े हो जाएंगे पहले के मुकाबले, मोर फंक्शनली ऑर्गेनाइज्ड हो जाएंगे. The responsibilities of the ruler are also going to change. पहले क्या रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी होती थी? Leading the tribe in battle, searching for cattle, struggling for cattle or defending. अब क्या रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी हो जाएगी? Maintaining law and order within, imparting justice within, defending from without, and expanding into new areas by conquering territory from neighboring kingdoms. It, so the roles are going to become much more well defined. The kings are going to assume more and more power unto themselves. Okay? And further, suppose this is a territorial kingdom, corporates this additional territory. यहाँ पे कौन से लोग रह रहे होंगे इसके पे? Belonging to people who are living in this tribe or other outsiders? Outsiders, but now they are all part of the same political outfit, right? Are or is there any going to be any basis therefore for tribal lineage based state, that all people are related to the ruler through blood relations or kinship relations? ऐसा कुछ idea रहेगा? नहीं रहेगा, right? And therefore the legitimacy of the kings would now be rested elsewhere, right? The kings are no longer going to be considered first among equals, rather they are going to be considered supreme rulers. एंड ऐसे सुप्रीम रूलर्स की पावर को एक्सरसाइज करने के लिए क्या चाहिए होगा? आर्मी और ब्यूरोक्रेसी तो चाहिए ही होगा, साथ में आइडियोलॉजी भी चाहिए होगा. व्हाट वाज द मोस्ट पावरफुल आइडियोलॉजी एट दैट पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम? रिलीजन, राइट? रिलीजन को कैसे यूज किया जाएगा? The priestly class is going to be used to legitimize the rule of the king through a combination of rituals, in return for which they are going to be richly rewarded by the kings. So a prince, priest, nexus is also going to merge. Right? Further, what do we get to see? Nature of relationship between different polities, between different kingdoms. Peaceful or conflict? Constant warfare रहेगा. For what? For acquiring more territory and acquiring more पॉपुलेशन. ठीक है? टेरिटरी क्यों? ज़्यादा लैंड होगा एंड पॉपुलेशन को क्यों? प्रोडक्टिव बेस बढ़ेगा, राइट? नंबर ऑफ फार्मर्स, नंबर ऑफ टैक्सपेयर्स दे आर गोइंग टू ग्रो. हाँ, मिरर में जा रहा है. अनिल, व्हाट काइंड ऑफ इमेज आर यू गेटिंग ऑन योर एंड? ठीक दिख रहा है या फिर मिरर में जा रहा है? फाइन, गुड. हाँ जी, कांस्टेंट वॉरफेयर कैरेक्टरिस्टिक होगा इसका. ठीक है. Then we are also going to find the ritualization of polity, because now to religious ideology, the divine nature of kingship is going to be reinforced by the priestly class. तो उस डिविनिटी को ट्रांसफर करने के लिए और उस डिविनिटी का एग्जाम्पल देने के लिए, उसको डेमोन्स्ट्रेट करने के लिए कुछ रिचुअल्स भी अब इन्वॉल्व हो जाएंगे, राइट. तो सम पब्लिक रिचुअल्स और रॉयल रिचुअल्स आर गोइंग टू इमर्ज, सच एज अश्वमेध, राजसूय एंड वाजपेय सैक्रिफाइस. अश्वमेध सैक्रिफाइस वाज अ हॉर्स सैक्रिफाइस. होता क्या था इसमें, that for 1 year the king's royal horse was set free to roam around. कहाँ पे छोड़ा जाता था? In the interior of the kingdom? No, on the outskirts of the kingdom, so that he would roam into the territory of a neighboring kingdom. If his horse was not stopped, then whatever area he had covered during the 1 year of his roaming, that would be now considered to be part of this king's territory. However, if he was stopped or killed, क्या होगा? वॉर होगा वहां पे. किसके लिए? टेरिटरी के लिए, राइट. एंड थ्रू वॉर इट वुड बी. Now, if it was not stopped or not killed, then it would be brought back to the capital. Over there, it would be sacrificed. Right? बड़ा सा सेरेमनी होगा. राजसूय सैक्रिफाइस परफॉर्म्ड एट द टाइम ऑफ coronation. तो एक ताजपोशी का सेरेमनी होता था, राइट. This was performed in order to enhance the power of the king. And Vajpaya sacrifice, this was performed or this involved a chariot race. This was performed just before the coronation. तो chariot race किसके बीच में होगा? किंग के बीच में और उसके भाइयों भतीजों और कजिन्स के बीच में होगा. Who is always going to win? The king would be made to win. Why? To show that he is actually the most deserving one. He is the one who has the most qualities for being a king. इस तरह की चीजें अब होने लगी. What else do we see? Democratic assemblies. Are they going to continue or will they become obsolete? Became obsolete, right? And apart from this, अब क्या होने लग जाएगा? The king was not simply considered to be the main defender, but also the upholder of dharma. Later Vedic age में concept of dharma started to emerge. Usually इसको कैसे define करते हैं? As the social order in which every group, every individual is assigned a particular set of duties towards themselves as well as to others. If they perform their duties to themselves and to others, social order is going to remain intact. However, if they don't, society may be at the risk of breaking down. And ये धर्मा को assign कैसे किया जाता था, duties को assign कैसे किया जाता था? On the basis of Varna status of an individual, on the basis of the ashram status of an individual, and on the basis of the age of all individuals. So, in other words, dharma, when it came to political sense, actually meant law. So, he was the main enforcer of law, main upholder of justice as well, right? Dharma was also another synonym for the Varnashram Dharma system. क्या क्या कंपोनेंट्स हैं? वर्ण, आश्रम एंड धर्म। इस सिस्टम को डिफाइन किसने किया? स्कॉलर्स। हु वर द स्कॉलर्स? द ब्राह्मण्स। दैट इज व्हाई विद इन द वर्णा सिस्टम फर्स्ट पोजीशन वाज ऑफ Brahmins. Ashram system was introduced further to regulate human life so that Brahmins could be involved in performance of various rituals at different stages of an individual's life. ठीक है, तो 16 संस्कार फॉर एग्जाम्पल इंट्रोड्यूस कराए जाएंगे एंड इस पूरी व्यवस्था को, इस पूरी सिस्टम को क्या बोला गया? वर्णाश्रम धर्मा सिस्टम। उसको अपहोल्ड करने की रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी किसकी थी? किंग की थी. A king of the earlier period was known as Janesya Gopa. How he would be referred to as Rajan. ठीक है. When it comes to taxation, क्या देखने के लिए मिलेगा? Is the same kind of taxation system as the early Vedic age going to continue? No. Bali, which is the earliest known kind of tax in India, now became compulsory levy, right? It was a symbol of the king's sovereignty collected on the basis of strength. Then Bagh emerged as the most important source of state revenue. This was the land revenue. Bagh का मतलब a portion or division. A portion of the total surplus was to be, or the total produce was to be given to the state as land revenue. Bhog was collected. Now, this was a voluntary offering of fruits and flowers by the people to the king. And Shulk was a commercial tax. Levied on secondary economic activities such as trade, commerce, sale and purchase of goods, etc. ठीक है, मैन्युफैक्चरिंग ऑफ गुड्स. तो हर तरह की कमर्शियल एक्टिविटी के ऊपर शुल्क लगाया जाएगा. Official in charge of collecting Bali, बाली साधक. भाग को कलेक्ट करने वाला भाग दूगा. Apart from that, since taxation sources are improving, the state is also in a position to maintain its own treasury. एक ट्रेजरर भी होना चाहिए. कौन? संघित्री. Right? What does all this indicate? Was any change taking place when it came to the nature of the bureaucracy? क्या हो रहा था? It was becoming more elaborate. Large number of new functionaries emerged in order to fill the or fulfill the new functions that the state had started to perform. And unlike the early Vedic age where these officials were all elected, अब ये क्या होंगे? Appointed, right? You are appointed by whom? By the king himself. ठीक है? Worked at his pleasure. When it comes to the army, did the later Vedic states possess a standing army or not? नहीं था, because they were not in a position to do so. So while the importance of the army was rising, the nature of these territorial states क्या था? They were small and had small populations as well, and thus they had no permanent army. It is only towards the end of the later Vedic age that in the region of Magad, for the first time, conditions emerged which allowed the raising of a permanent army. ठीक है, ये कब होगा? From around 600 BCE onwards. And what would make this possible? During the Mahajanpad period, permanent armies are going to become a feature of not only Magad but all the Mahajanpadas. What would make it possible? ये जो चल रहा है, constant warfare, क्या होगा इसकी वजह से? Some states are going to win, some states are going to lose. The territory of the vanquished states is going to be incorporated by the victor states. Their resources are going to expand, manpower is going to grow, the territory is going to grow, tax resources are going to grow. Ultimately, they are going to have ample manpower as well as surplus to spare for maintaining a permanent army. Right? So these are the features of the state during the later Vedic age. Write down. The later Vedic age is characterized by the emergence of territorial polity, polities. Polities. Point लिखो. As the importance of agriculture increased, so did the importance of land and manpower. Stop. It's a point. The early tribal states began absorbing the territory of their neighbors, thus losing their own identity. ठीक है, तो जो lineage based tribal identity था, that was diluted. Now in this state there were not only members of the same tribe but a large number of others as well. Next point. As such, the Jan of the early Vedic age was replaced by the Janpad during the later Vedic age. पहले होता था जन, अब हो गया जनपद. डिफरेंस क्या है? जन represented the tribe, जनपद represented the territorial state. By Janpad during the later Vedic age. Clear? Next main point लिखो. The Jane Segopa, the Jane Segopa of the early Vedic age, transformed into a hereditary monarch. Full stop. A point. With agriculture, comma, regular taxation allowed the rulers to centralize power, resulting in the emergence of A B C D करके लिखो. A, hereditary monarchy. B, absolutism. C, the concept of the divine rights of kings. And D, high sounding titles. Such as Samrat, Swarat, 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 Ekrat, and Virat. ठीक है. नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट लिखो. With the emergence of absolute hereditary monarchy, comma, there was a need to provide ideological support and justification for the new political machinery. Ideological support and justification for the new political machinery. Full stop. A point. Religion was mobilized for this purpose. The kings or rulers, full stop, the rulers were legitimized in the eyes of the people by the priests to elaborate public rituals, such as the Ashwamedh sacrifice, such as the Ashwamedh sacrifice, Rajsuya sacrifice, and Vajpayee sacrifice. And Vajpayee sacrifice. क्लियर है इतना? एंड वाजपेयी सैक्रिफाइस. यहां तक की कहानी क्लियर है ना? नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट लिखो. कांस्टेंट वॉरफेयर. कांस्टेंट वॉरफेयर between the different janpadas. Between the different janpadas was a prominent feature. Was a prominent feature. Full stop. It resulted in the territorial enlargement or territorial aggrandizement or enlargement of the stronger states which finally developed into जनपद से ये सबसे जो स्ट्रॉन्ग वाले हैं वो क्या बनेंगे? महाजनपद. which finally developed into महाजनपद्स. नेक्स्ट पॉइंट लिखो. with the emergence of royal supremacy and the end of tribal statehood the democratic elements of polity, the democratic elements of early Vedic polity, disappeared. Full stop. The point. The democratic assemblies such as Sabha, Samiti and Vidhat became obsolete. It's a point. The election of the king and other officials went out of vogue. Vogue, V-O-G-U-E. Out of vogue. As hereditary kingship and appointed officials replaced them. ठीक है. नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट लिखो. The king also assumed far more responsibilities as compared to The early Vedic tribal chief. Early Vedic tribal chief. The Vedic tribal chief. Full stop. The point. Not only was he responsible for maintaining defense and order, he was also defined as the upholder of dharma. As the upholder of dharma. This means his office was not purely a political one, it was partly political, partly spiritual. Write down the point. As such, the office of the king was given spiritual foundations. Spiritual foundations. Next point. Next main point. Regular taxation. Regular taxation emerged as a prominent feature of later Vedic polity. Full stop. The point. Bali became a compulsory tax. Ideological justification क्या था इसके पीछे? King is responsible for protection of the people, so they must pay the king. Within brackets, you can give the write down. Justified on the basis of defense. Okay. Next sub point. Bhag or land revenue emerged as the chief source of state income. In the later Vedic texts, एक particular rate prescribed किया गया है, that is 1/6 of the total produce. Within brackets, you can write prescribed rate 1/6. 1/6. Okay. 1/6. Next, right. Next point. Bhog was a voluntary offering. Of fruits and flowers by the people to the king. Lastly, shulk. A commercial tax on non-agricultural activities. Next point लिखो. Next main point. However, even after the beginning of regular taxation, There was no permanent standing army. There was no permanent standing army during the later Vedic age. Stop. A point. This is because the resource mobilization capacity of the Janpadas was small. Janpadas was small. Next sub point. Further, they also lacked the necessary manpower for maintaining a large professional army. Large professional army. Next sub point. As the stronger next sub point likho, as the stronger Mahajanpadas grew in size, comma, they came closer to being able to raise permanent armies. They came closer to being able to raise permanent armies. और finally ये stage पे पहुंचे कब? When they transformed from Janpadas into Mahajanpadas during the Mahajanpad age. सबसे पहले ये कहाँ देखने के लिए मिलेगा? The region of Magad, सेंट्रल बिहार में देखने के लिए. Clear? नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट लिखो. While the militarization of the state took place at a limited scale, comma, its bureaucratization was much more evident. Full stop. The Taittiriya Brahmana, सब पॉइंट में लिखना. Taittiriya Brahmana refers to a council of 12 Ratnins or ministers to assist the king. Full stop. The Shatpath Brahmana. Next. The Shatpath Brahmana mentions new officials such as Bali Sadhak, Bhagduga. बाली साधक का पर्पस क्या था? कलेक्ट बाली. भाग दूंगा का कलेक्ट भाग. Sanghitri was the treasurer. Akshpattalika, he was the record keeper. क्या लिखा आपने? शतपथ ब्राह्मण मेंशंस न्यू ऑफिशियल सच एज ये हो गए, apart from older ones such as Senani and Purohit. Apart from older ones, Senani and Purohit. ठीक है. Next point. Sub point. Unlike the early Vedic age, all these officials were appointed by the kings rather than elected. ठीक है? Is this clear? Next point लिखो. The lower levels of political organization remained the same. Earlier, Jan was divided into Vis, Gram and Kul. Now the Janpad is also going to consist of Vis, Gram and Kul. But obviously the way in which these levels interact, that is going to be much more different. क्या एलिमेंट देखने के लिए मिलेगा? सेंट्रलाइजेशन का एलिमेंट देखने के लिए मिलेगा. इन सारे लेवल्स के बीच में देयर इज गोइंग टू बी मोर कोऑर्डिनेशन and the flow of resources is going to take place from bottom towards the top. Write down. Remain the क्या लिखा है अभी आपने? Remains the same. A point. The Janpad consisted of a number of Vis which were further subdivided into Gramas and Kulas respectively. However, next point. However, the type of interaction between these levels was very different. Comma, characterized by higher centralization, comma, higher interconnectedness, and the upward flow of resources. But since the later Vedic texts remain silent about how exactly this centralization was enforced from top to bottom, we cannot know for sure. Okay? Next up point लिखो. However, we are uncertain about the exact nature or exact process exact process, unsure about the exact process of this structure, due to absence of relevant information. ठीक है, ये हो गया देखो the political structure of the later Vedic age. तो economic structure, political structure we have covered. अब क्या देखना है? Society and religion, that we are going to discuss in tomorrow's lecture. If there are any doubts, please let me know, guys. कोई doubts हैं? नहीं? शुभ्रानिल, तो बताया है, समझ में आया है? Are there any doubts? No doubts from class. एक जनरल प्रॉब्लम हो रहा है, बताइए. Unable to manage time and schedule between my job, GS and optional. तो GS को अभी फिलहाल कितना टाइम दे रहे हैं? एक काम करते हैं शुभ्रानिल, दैट वी शुड टॉक ऑन द फोन रादर देन लाइक दिस. ठीक है, तो अभी मैं यहाँ से निकल के आपको कॉल करता हूँ. चलिए, ऑलराइट देन. तो कल मिलते हैं. Other aspects of later Vedic age we are going to cover, and we will try to get into Mahajanpad period as well. Thank you.